Story 22. The highway stretched for miles, a lonely ribbon of asphalt cutting through barren landscapes. It was the kind of road where you could drive for hours without seeing another soul, the desert stretching out on either side like an endless wasteland. I was on my way to a business meeting in another state, but I'd taken this detour to avoid traffic and get some quiet time on the open road. The day was fading into dusk, the sky turning shades of orange and pink, when I passed by an old, abandoned gas station. It was a relic from another era, its rusty sign swaying in the breeze, the paint peeling off its walls. Something about it caught my eye, a sense of nostalgia, maybe, or just curiosity about what had happened to the place. I slowed down and pulled over, my tires crunching on the gravel. The gas station looked like it hadn't been used in years, the windows boarded up, and the pumps covered in dust and cobwebs. But as I got out of my car, I felt a strange pull, like something was drawing me inside. The door creaked as I pushed it open, the hinges groaning with age. The interior was dark, the faint light from the setting sun casting long shadows across the floor. I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the empty space. The walls were lined with old shelves, some of them collapsed under the weight of years of neglect. The air was musty, filled with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. As I walked through the gas station, I noticed a pile of newspapers on the floor, tucked into a corner near the back. They looked out of place, not like the rest of the decaying debris. I picked one up, brushing off the dust, and my eyes widened when I saw the date it was from just a few days ago. The headline read, "Person missing in this area." I grabbed another newspaper, then another, each one with the same headline, each one detailing a different disappearance. The stories were all similar: people who had been traveling through the area, who had stopped for gas or to rest, and who had vanished without a trace. The articles mentioned search parties and police investigations, but no leads, no clues as to what had happened to them. A chill ran down my spine as I flipped through the newspapers, each one filled with stories of missing people. I wondered why they were here, in this abandoned gas station, far from the nearest town. It felt like a warning, a message for those who ventured into this desolate stretch of highway. I decided to leave, the sense of unease growing with each passing moment. But as I turned to go, I heard a noise from the back of the gas station, a faint shuffling, like someone or something was moving in the darkness. I froze, my heart racing, my instincts telling me to run. The shuffling grew louder, more deliberate, like someone was approaching. I backed away, my steps cautious, my eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. But the gas station was silent again, the only sound my own breathing, heavy and uneven. I knew I couldn't stay, not after what I'd found, not with the headlines repeating in my mind, "Person missing in this area." I left the gas station, the door slamming shut behind me, the echo reverberating through the empty highway. The sky was darker now, the sun a distant memory, and the landscape seemed even more desolate. I got into my car and drove, my headlights cutting through the darkness, the road stretching out before me like a lifeline. The rest of the drive was filled with a sense of urgency, the memory of the abandoned gas station and its ominous newspapers haunting me. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see someone or something following me down the highway. But there was nothing, just the empty road and the distant howl of the wind. When I reached the next town, I stopped at a small diner and called the local authorities, reporting what I had found. The dispatcher seemed concerned but not surprised, as if the disappearances were becoming a common occurrence. I knew I had done the right thing, but the fear lingered, the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something dark and dangerous. I never took that stretch of highway again, and I avoided driving at night whenever I could. The abandoned gas station, the newspapers with their chilling headlines, it was all too much to forget. The desolate roads held their secrets, and I knew I was lucky to have escaped without becoming another story in the headlines. Story 23. House sitting for a wealthy family seemed like an easy gig. It was a grand estate, the kind with a long driveway and manicured lawns. The owners were out of town for a few weeks, and my job was to water the plants, feed the pets, and make sure the place didn't fall into disarray. I had the run of the house, which included the study, a cozy room with dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and a massive mahogany desk. The study was my favorite spot. It had an air of mystery, filled with old artifacts and curiosities. But there was one thing that always caught my eye: a drawer in the desk, locked tight with a heavy padlock. The rest of the desk was accessible, but that drawer was off limits. Naturally, my curiosity was piqued. One evening, after a day of watching movies and lounging by the pool, I decided to explore the study more thoroughly. The locked drawer was an itch I couldn't scratch, a puzzle begging to be solved. I found a set of keys in the master bedroom, tucked away in a jewelry box, and one of them fit the padlock perfectly. The lock clicked open, and I slid the drawer out, expecting to find valuables or family heirlooms. Instead, there was a stack of VHS tapes, each one labeled with a name and a date. The names were familiar; they belonged to the family members who owned the house, but the dates ranged from years ago to the present day. What disturbed me most was the most recent tape it was still recording. I felt a chill run down my spine as I picked up the tapes, examining the labels. There was a tape for each family member, from the father and mother to the teenage son and daughter. The dates on the labels suggested they were recorded over a period of years, documenting moments from the family's life. But why would the most recent tape still be recording? And why would it be locked away in a drawer? I took the tapes to the living room, where an old VHS player was connected to a large television. I hesitated, wondering if I should really be watching these tapes, but my curiosity got the better of me. I loaded the first tape, one labeled with the father's name, and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, showing a static-filled image. Slowly, it resolved into a scene of the study, the same room where I had found the tapes. The father was sitting at the desk, typing on a laptop, seemingly unaware that he was being recorded. The angle suggested the camera was hidden, positioned somewhere in the study where it couldn't be seen. I watched as the father worked, answering phone calls and flipping through paperwork. It was mundane at first, but then he stopped, his expression changing to one of fear. He looked around, as if sensing something in the room, but there was nothing there. The tape ended abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers. I loaded the next tape, this one labeled with the mother's name. It showed her in the kitchen, preparing dinner, but again, there was a sense of unease. She glanced over her shoulder repeatedly, as if expecting someone to appear. The same pattern emerged: normal activities, followed by sudden moments of fear or suspicion. I continued through the tapes, each one showing a different family member in their own setting: the son playing video games, the daughter talking on her phone, but each time, there was a moment of tension, a sense that they were being watched. The final tape, the one still recording, showed an empty room, with only the sound of distant voices in the background. I knew I had stumbled upon something sinister, something that suggested the family was under surveillance, but I didn't know why. The tapes, the hidden cameras, the locked drawer, it all pointed to a secret that the family didn't want anyone to know. But who was recording these tapes, and why were they hidden away, out of sight? I decided to call the family, to tell them what I'd found, but there was no answer. Their phones went straight to voicemail, as if they were out of range or intentionally ignoring calls. The sense of isolation grew, the mansion feeling less like a home and more like a fortress, each room hiding its own secrets. I knew I had to leave, to get out of the house before whatever was happening reached me. I packed my things, grabbing the tapes, and headed for the front door. But as I reached for the handle, I heard a faint noise from the study, the sound of someone moving through the room. I turned, my heart racing, but the house was silent, the only sound my own rapid breathing. I left the mansion, the tapes clutched tightly in my hands, the fear following me down the driveway. I knew I had uncovered something dangerous, something that threatened not just the family but anyone who got too close. The tapes were the key to a mystery, but the deeper I dug, the more I realized that some secrets were best left locked away. Story 24. Working the night shift as a guard at a correctional facility wasn't glamorous, but it had its moments of excitement. The place was massive, a sprawling complex of concrete and steel, with corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The night shift was typically quiet. Most of the inmates were locked in their cells, and the occasional noise was usually just the result of restlessness or boredom. But on this particular night, something felt off. The air was thicker, the shadows darker, and the usual sounds of the facility seemed muted. My rounds took me through various sections of the facility, each one with its own atmosphere. The older parts were the creepiest, with rusted bars and outdated equipment that hadn't been used in years. The execution chamber was one of those places, a relic from a darker time. It had been closed for years, ever since the state abolished capital punishment, but the chamber still stood, a silent reminder of the past. As I walked through the corridor near the execution chamber, I heard a faint whispering. At first I thought it was my imagination, the wind playing tricks with the old ventilation system. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if someone or something was speaking just beyond the chamber's heavy metal door. I hesitated, my flashlight casting erratic beams of light on the walls. The whispering was coming from inside the execution chamber, a place that hadn't been used in years. I felt a chill run down my spine as I approached the door, my hand hovering over the handle. The whispers were too faint to make out, but they had a rhythm, a cadence that suggested they were more than just random noise. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The chamber was dark, the only light coming from my flashlight. The air was musty, filled with the scent of old stone and decaying metal. But what caught my attention was the small candle burning on the floor, its flame flickering, as if disturbed by a breeze. Next to the candle was a piece of paper, its edges singed and curling from the heat. I picked up the paper, my heart racing as I saw what was written on it. It was my name, spelled out in ashes, the letters carefully formed and precise. I felt a surge of fear, the whispering in the background growing louder, like a chorus of voices rising from the walls. It was as if the chamber itself had come to life, the ghosts of the past returning to deliver a message. I backed out of the chamber, my hands trembling, the paper clutched tightly in my grip. The whispers followed me, growing more intense, as if they were angry that I'd interrupted them. I shut the door and bolted it, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I knew I had to leave, to get out of that section of the facility before whatever was in the execution chamber found me. I radioed for backup, my voice shaking as I explained what I'd found. The other guards arrived quickly, their flashlights casting long beams down the corridor. I showed them the paper with my name written in ashes, and they exchanged uneasy glances. The whispering had stopped, the corridor falling silent, but the fear lingered. We checked the security footage, hoping to find some explanation for the candle and the paper, but the cameras showed nothing unusual. It was as if the execution chamber had always been empty, the candle and the whispers existing only in my mind. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard, and I couldn't dismiss it as a hallucination. The rest of the night was tense, the other guards keeping a close watch on the corridor near the execution chamber. No one else heard the whispers, and the candle was gone by morning, leaving no trace of its existence. The paper with my name in ashes was the only evidence, a chilling reminder that something strange had happened in that chamber. I knew I couldn't stay on the night shift, not after what I'd experienced. The whispers, the candle, the piece of paper with my name, they were all signs that the past had come back to haunt the facility. I requested a transfer to the day shift, hoping that the light of day would dispel the shadows that had gathered in the old execution chamber. But I knew that some shadows were too dark to be erased, and the memory of that night would stay with me forever.